Someone You Should Know, a program about people you know and even more that you don't. Hosted by Stuart Sax, veteran, husband, father, and grandfather. Now, here's your host, Stuart Sax.
Well, welcome to another edition of Someone You Should Know. This show is going to be a little bit different from our normal shows because you're going to be seeing some closed captioning at the bottom because it is a necessary part of the show for my very, very special guest. We are brought to you today by our good friend Christine Dean, who we affectionately know as the DFW Networking Diva. Now, Christine has been the producer of this show and a sponsor of this show almost from its get-go, and she is also an absolute master at helping you with your website design, with marketing your business, and taking your business to the next level. Any questions you might have, please reach out to Christine Dean, the DFW Networking Diva, and she'll take good care of you. Well, today, folks, I have met an absolutely incredible young lady who was born hearing, but due to an accident, lost her hearing at the age of 10. And however, that was not a holdback for her because she has turned it into a career in teaching other students in the deaf world about the opportunities that they have as hearing students and hearing adults in society. She is absolute pleasure. I welcome to the show Rachel Zemach. Thank you very, very much for being here, Rachel. And what little sign language I know, I will say, and happy to see you.
I'm really glad to be here. It's an honor. Thank you.
And I want to start really by you sharing with the audience your personal story of how you entered the I guess I could say the world of the deaf.
So I was born hearing, and when I was 10, I was just playing in school. 2 weeks earlier, I had been, they had a school-wide hearing test, and they found that I was deaf in one ear, completely deaf, or 95% deaf in one ear, and the other ear I had normal hearing. And then 2 weeks after that, I was swinging and slipped. My hand slipped and I fell, bumped my head on the bottom step and knocked out 100% of my hearing in the good ear. So all of a sudden, I went from 105% to 5% hearing. So I was suddenly very, very deaf. And that was when I was 10. And it was a little bit shocking to suddenly be deaf, but I never saw it as a bad thing. And like you said, it has become my direction in life. And I've met my people, some of my favorite people and the deaf community and sign language. These are all gifts. And I've made a career out of it, and I've written a book about it. So a lot of positive things. There you go. There it is.
Let me see if I get it in the right way so that we can see it. It is called The Butterfly Cage.
Yeah.
There we go. The Butterfly Cage. It is a fascinating book because it not only chronicles the work that you have been doing in the school system, but you also have many, many references to the children that you have interacted with. You share a lot of the classroom antics, the classroom situations that you've been in with the students, and it brings it to the hearing reader a new dimension of what it must be like to interact with someone who does not have that hearing capability. And again, a fascinating book. I encourage folks, check it out, The Butterfly Cage. It's available on all your bookstore websites and all. And it would make a good gift if you know someone who is hard of hearing also. So I just want to go back for a minute. You have gone from birth to age 10 in the public school system as a hearing student, and all of a sudden, just due to a fateful interaction on the playground, and now all of a sudden you walk into that classroom, and you can't hear what's going on. Was that determined that, well, you need to come out of the public school system and go into a school system that is more focused on you with your deafness now?
When I was 10, I lived in England, and I did go back to my school after the accident. It happened at home, and then I was home for probably 1 or 2 months trying to regain my balance. And I went back to the same school afterwards, and it did not go well. Things happened. For example, one day in my class, we were all reading. Everybody was looking down and reading. And when I looked up, the classroom was empty. And it had happened very suddenly. And I was kind of shocked. And I got up and went to the next class next door, and the next, and every class was empty. And it was totally bewildering. Well, it turned out that was a fire alarm, and everybody had gone downstairs and they were all outside. Nobody had told me, and I hadn't heard the fire alarm. So,
of course,
things like that started happening, and finally the teachers took my parents aside and said, "This isn't working anymore. She's too deaf to be here." So they put me in a boarding school, and I went to many different schools for the remainder of my school period until I was 18, in both Britain and this country when we moved here. With the exception of one school, all of the schools were hearing schools.
Yeah, I was just going to say, when they sent you to this boarding school, was this boarding school equipped to handle students that had some kind of limitations like this?
No, it was not a school for the deaf. My parents, when I suddenly became deaf, they called the British Association for the Deaf. And what happens with many parents is they've never met a deaf person before. They suddenly find they have a deaf baby or a deaf child. My situation is unusual because it happened when I was 10. Usually
Right.
they're babies when the parents find out that they're deaf. or their infants. So the parents have no idea what to do, and they start asking around, and they look online, and back in those days they looked in the telephone book, and
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
first organization that they find for the deaf, they start reading, or they start talking to them, and whatever that organization directs them to do, they do it. Most parents, they want to do the right thing for their kid, and they feel that they have no knowledge, but the specialists do have knowledge. So they very blindly follow the advice they're given by the first organization they find. Now,
Yeah.
this leads to huge systemic problems. And before I go into that, I'll just say that in my situation, my parents were told when they called the Royal Association of the Deaf in Britain, they were told, look, just give your child hearing aids, maybe cochlear implants, and put them in a regular school, and she'll be okay. She can learn to function in the hearing world. And my parents did that. They never were told. And they never thought of putting me in a deaf school. And,
Was there a deaf school in Britain at the time?
oh, yeah.
Oh, they did have it.
Oh, yes. Deaf schools in Britain at that time, and still, were largely, most of the programs for deaf children were largely oral. So they focused on speech and hearing aids. However, there were some deaf schools. And what I want you to understand is 85% of our students in this country, deaf and hard of hearing students, 85% go to regular schools with hearing students. And many of them are the only deaf student in the whole school. They're just sort of thrown in there into a hearing school. And about 10% go to deaf schools. And almost every state in this country has one or two state-run deaf schools. And what I want you to know is that if you walk into a deaf school compared to if you walk into a hearing school where there are 1 or even 10 deaf students, you're entering 2 totally different worlds. And they're different in terms of the language they use, the mode of communication. They're different in terms of psychology, how they will impact the students. The students at the deaf schools develop a sense of pride in being deaf, whereas the students in hearing schools usually try to hide that.
Yeah,
fact.
they're looked upon as second-class citizens in the
Yes.
school.
And they feel that way.
Yeah. in a situation where there are deaf students that are integrated into the regular public school programs, you mentioned earlier about hearing aids or the cochlear implant, and I want you to take a moment to explain to the people that are watching and listening what the cochlear implant is, and also when you lost your hearing, you were down to 5% in one ear. Were you a candidate for the cochlear implant or a candidate for hearing aids? Can hearing aids be given to someone who is almost totally deaf?
So I'm wearing hearing aid right now. I have,
Okay.
yeah. And without that hearing aid, in other words, if there was no such thing as hearing aids or cochlear implants at this time in history, then I wouldn't be talking right now, because it would have been so many years that I hadn't heard my own voice that I would forget how to talk. Of course, right now, in order to understand you, I'm relying on captions.
Right.
100%. But I've maintained my speech thanks to the hearing aid. So to answer your question, when I was 10, cochlear implants were just beginning to be a thing. And cochlear implants, what it is it's a surgery that is done in the head. In the inner ear, it places electrodes in the inner ear and then a magnet on the outside of the head. And so when somebody speaks, the magnet picks it up and transmits it to the inner ear, to the cochlea. Cochlear implants have become more and more and more widely used over the years. And people are, many people, especially doctors and audiologists and speech therapists often, are evangelical about them. They believe in them fiercely. However, the deaf community sees them differently.
Really?
Not that they, very differently. Not that they disapprove of them, but that if you're a parent and you have a little deaf kid, you're told by every doctor and every stranger on the street, even, get your kid a cochlear implant, it will solve the problem.
Yeah.
And the biggest problem is that you're also told, don't learn sign language, just get your kid a cochlear implant.
Yeah, and I mean that leads us into the next area that I wanted to talk about, was the fact that hearing aids have a place in this treatment. The cochlear implant is the same thing, but that ASL, American Sign Language, and I understand that there was even a BSL, a British Sign Language, when you were in Britain, that it is a foreign language, basically, that anyone, hearing or not hearing, can learn in order to interact with people who are deaf. That ASL is a phenomenal language to learn. It's a visual language.
It's an extraordinary language, and each country has their own sign language. So BSL in Britain, every country has a sign language. There's a Mexican sign language, etc.
Are there certain signs that are universal or international, so that if someone from the United States once is deaf and travels abroad to foreign countries, are there certain greetings and hellos and questions and signs, like what time is it, and are some of those interactive no matter where in the world you are?
So every sign language is completely different.
Oh, wow, just like
Completely different.
languages.
However, what's true about what you asked is that there is an international sign language, and it's relatively new, and not that many people know it. And
Wow.
it's often, you see it in webinars, for example, that are international in their nature. For example, the World Federation of the Deaf. It's talking about deaf issues all over the world. And they give their webinars in international sign language. So it's a wonderful idea, but it's only known to a certain group of people, largely very highly educated deaf people who are involved in international deaf issues, not the average deaf person. So it exists, and it's a great idea, and it's a great thing, but it's not used widely. The other part,
Did I also see in the readings about you and all, and this is a statistic that I just have a hard time understanding, is that as much as 70% of parents of deaf children do not know or use sign language.
yeah, I would say even more than that. I would say closer to 85%.
Why is there a reason for that? Wouldn't parents want to be able to share that language with their children, to know sign language, to effectively communicate with their child, and then when they travel with the child, they can communicate with other people who are hearing or deaf. But if only 20 to 30% of the parents care enough to learn that language of the deaf people, it seems staggering to me, because it is not an easy language to learn and all. But from my limited personal experience, it's an absolutely beautiful language to watch. To be in a room of deaf people and what, especially like teenagers, to see them sitting in a cafeteria and interacting with each other with their signs, and very, very strong facial expressions go along with signing too, and they have their own slang languages. It's actually a beautiful language to watch.
more than just beautiful, it is key to brain development for deaf children in a way that nothing else, in my experience as a teacher, nothing else even comes remotely close. So, first, to answer your question, and I'm really glad you brought this up, of how few parents learn sign language. There are a few reasons for it. One, as you mentioned, it's not easy to do. But a more terrible reason is that the advice that parents are given by doctors, medical professionals of all kinds, even educational specialists, is not to learn sign language because they see it as being they see it as being anti-productive in terms of making your child go in the direction of speaking, lip reading, and hearing. So, in other words, what doctors and the majority of educational specialists in this country and in Britain and all over the world want, what they believe is best for deaf children, is to put hearing aids and cochlear implants on them, teach them to speak, teach them to lip read, teach them to act as if they are not deaf, and put them in regular schools.
So they're promoting a more of a mechanical answer rather than a really productive social solution to the issue.
Yes, you're on the right track there. They have a medical way of looking at deaf people, pathological. Like, okay, the problem is deafness. We have to fix it.
Right.
And it's not that they have bad intentions, they have good intentions. However, they are missing something that is absolutely critical to human happiness and human brain development.
Right.
And academic success. And that is language. So when you have a little deaf kid and you try to get them to talk and you talk to them and you put them in a hearing school, they're at a huge disadvantage. They don't have any language yet. They don't have sign language. They don't have English because they don't hear and they can't learn it in the normal way. So they're language deprived. And this impacts the way their brain will work for the rest of their life. Compared to if you have a little deaf kid and you're giving them language visually, and you're giving them a complete language, sign language, complete, through the eyes, and their brains will take off.
Right. It's interesting to me. Another question that I want to ask you, Rachel, is I have heard a lot of terms for people that are deaf. I mean, certainly the word deaf. There's the phrase hard of hearing, hearing impaired, hearing challenged. I think even autism is a word that's often used. Which of these terms are politically correct, and are any of those terms kind of offensive to people who do have hearing issues?
That's a great question. So hearing impaired is not a term that deaf people like. It's a phrase that hearing people tend to use thinking that they're being nice. Because the root idea that most hearing people have is that to be deaf is something negative. It's something to feel bad about, to be sorry for, to be sympathetic about. So they feel that it's an act of kindness to not say the word deaf, but instead say hearing impaired. However, deaf people who are proud of being deaf and who have a healthy self-identity and relationship to their deafness, they don't like the word impaired because it means broken, and they don't feel broken.
Right.
If they're like me, they feel lucky to be deaf.
Yeah. So it's almost similar to somebody that is seeing impaired as opposed to using the word blind. People are afraid of saying that the person is blind.
Right. Just say it the way it is. And to take that even further, in my book, I called all the children deaf, even though many of them are hard of hearing technically. Many of them can have some hearing. Yeah, maybe if I hold it up the
Yep, that works even better than what I'm trying to do.
yeah, because there's some light that's
Yes.
reflecting off when you do it.
Yeah, the Butterfly Cage by Rachel Zemach, and there is so much in your book because you talk about your experiences as a deaf child. You talk about your experiences as a teacher and an educator. You talk about very, very seriously, you talk about the role that you feel education has taken so far, and also the role that they haven't taken within the deaf community. And it's a no nonsense approach because you feel very, very strongly that not enough is being done for the deaf community within the school system, and that there's a lot of changes that need to be made.
Absolutely. I want to go back to one word that you brought up because it's an important word. The word is autism, AUDISM, autism. And what it means is discrimination against sign language and a deaf proud worldview. So it's just like sexism or racism or ageism, in that underneath the surface of what's going on is a deep feeling that to be deaf is a bad thing. To use sign language is not as good as to use speech. To belong to the deaf community is not as good as to be able to look like you're hearing and function in the hearing world. So there's this whole set of beliefs, and we call it autism, and it permeates our culture. It permeates especially our schools and medical settings. And it's extraordinarily harmful to deaf children, in my opinion, after what I saw as a teacher for 10 years.
And so what is Rachel Zemach doing going forward to promote changes in the way we as a society treat our brothers and sisters who are deaf?
I'm trying to write articles, and I'm trying to promote the book, because what I found is, and it's astonishing to me, but I'm finding that the book does have the power to change people's minds and make them see deaf people differently. And for example, I was at a conference deaf education conference called Cal Ed. And an administrator came up to me and she said, look, I've been trying to make a decision about whether to switch my deaf program. She runs a deaf program in a big hearing school district, a core deaf program that she oversees. She said, we use TC, which is total communication. It means signing and speaking at the same time. It's too much for me to explain here. But she said, I've been trying to decide whether to switch it over to bilingual education, ASL and English as two distinctly separate languages, both of them taught to all deaf students. She said, when I read your book, I decided to make the switch, and now we're switching our program to bilingualism. And another person said, when I finished the book, I signed up for ASL classes. And she has no connection to deaf people, but she was inspired.
Yeah.
Imagine if she was a parent.
Right.
You know, she all of a sudden would be learning how to communicate with her own child in a way that speech would not allow her to do. So the book has power, but unless people know about it, it can't do its job in the world.
Well, the book that you have written has basically become an encyclopedia for the deaf community, or even the hearing community, because there is so much information, as is your website, which is really very, very simple, rachelzemach.com. You can go to the website. There's a lot of very valuable information right there that you can get. You know, and I keep thinking back to the time when you were 10 years old. We're talking about, folks, remember, this is a time before we had Google, before you had video, the ability to communicate with each other, visually. We talked just very briefly about lip syncing, about being able to read lips. Well, what about COVID? All of a sudden, people who relied on lip syncing were wearing a mask, and now you cannot see the person's face in order to communicate. There is also explain to the people a little bit about what VRI is, because that's also part of the modern technology for people who are deaf.
Well, lip reading is incredibly hard. Hearing people tend to think that all deaf people lip read, and that's not true. Many deaf people are not willing to work that hard to understand somebody, and it simply is impossible a lot of the time. So for me, if I meet a stranger and I try to lip read them, you'll see my face and it will be like this.
Yeah, because you're concentrating.
I'm looking at their mouth and you can see there's stress and anxiety in my face. I'm working. Mentally, I'm working to put together all the pieces. Only 30% of the English language is lip readable.
That's
So
a small amount.
70% is guesswork. Yeah,
Right.
because a lot of the sounds are made in the throat or back in the mouth.
Right.
So it's only what you can see on the lips that you can use when you're lip reading. So it's mind-bogglingly difficult And if the lighting is bad, or if there's background noise, or two people talking at the same time, or you don't, yeah, let alone 10 people, or if you don't know the topic, or if somebody changed the subject suddenly, it gets harder and harder. Or if somebody has an accent or a mustache, or as you said, a mask.
Right.
It's so during the pandemic, I think one negative thing that happened was that there were all these articles in the news about lip reading and how hard it was for deaf people during the pandemic because they couldn't lip read. And that's true. If somebody has a mask on and I have to interact with them, if they're hearing, if they don't know sign language, my stress level will be sky high. It's almost, I mean, it's impossible for me to understand even one word they say with a mask on. Impossible. So I don't even try. I just tell them to write things down.
Right.
But the way that the pandemic, I feel, made things worse for us is that it gave hearing people the artificial idea that all deaf people lip read. And, you know, that all you have to do is take off your mask and
Right.
show your mouth.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can put the responsibility for communication 100% on the deaf person's shoulders. Just keep talking to them and make sure you don't have a mask on, and they'll do all the work of lip reading.
Well,
And this is not true.
fortunately, what technology has allowed us to do is exactly what we're doing while I am speaking to someone who is deaf. Closed captioning is displaying our entire conversation, and it makes it easier for both parties to follow the conversation. It is amazing to me. Rachel, I think that you are an absolutely incredible individual for what you have, the challenges that you have gone through, the challenges you have overcome, the challenges that you have shared with other people. And I commend you very, very much again for your book, The Butterfly Cage. And I'll encourage everybody that's watching and listening, get a copy of the book because it is really a fascinating book and an incredible cast of characters in the book that she shares. I have a very, very limited exposure to sign language and all, but the one thing that in wrapping up the show, the one thing that I will share with you is there is a sign alphabet. You can download it on your computer, and all 26 letters of the alphabet have a designation and all. It's very easy to see and to learn and to upload and to follow. And there's three key letters that I think are important. Number one, there is the I is the little finger. An L makes total sense. But when you put the I and the L together, you have the sign for love. And
I love you.
I love you is a sign of three fingers, and not to be confused, because if you take your hand and you go like this, you just said airplane.
Yeah, if you move it at the airplane or an airplane landing.
Airplane landing, right. Taking
yeah.
off and landing.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating language, I believe. And folks, also another thing, check with your local colleges, because very often the local colleges offer ASL classes. And it's a wonderful alternative to taking another foreign language. Look into it and all. And I honestly believe that maybe they should make ASL an option for students in all schools that are going to take French or German or Spanish or whatever. That ASL is also an option. Rachel, thank you so much, my friend, for taking the time to share your incredible stories with my audience. I wish you a beautiful, beautiful year ahead, and all the very, very best to you. And thank you for being someone that we should know on this program.
Thank you for having me.
It was my pleasure. Go out, make it a great day, folks, and we'll see you again next week for another edition of Someone You Should Know.
Someone You